Hello and good morning. This is your host Caroline. So Caroline for Enviro Pot. We are going to have a sit-down discussion with Caroline Chelal, who is an environmentalist, and we are going to focus on a discussion on biodiversity. Biodiversity loss, why it's happening and how to combat biodiversity loss. So Caroline, I'm going to dive in directly. You tell us why we have to talk about biodiversity. What is the significance? What is the essence of biodiversity?
Thank you, Caroline, for having me here in this discussion. And biodiversity is very important, especially to the human life, because we understand that nature has to balance, and without that balance, we are going to witness different destructive occurrences in the world, and therefore we really need to conserve our biodiversity. And therefore, I'll go directly to discuss what biodiversity is. Biodiversity is actually derived from two terms. That's biological diversity, and this implies all the living and the non-living components that makes up our ecosystems. And therefore, we have different levels of biodiversity. We have ecosystem diversity, we have species diversity, and genetic diversity. All these components make up our ecosystems. And so when I talk of ecosystem diversity, in this case, I'm talking about the different habitats that we exist. So we can talk of the grassland ecosystem, we talk of aquatic ecosystems. So they're actually different ecosystems. And when I talk of species diversity, I'm talking of the different, we know a species as a unique organism or animal. And then I go further to talk about genetic diversity. So among these species, they have different genetic makeup. So that brings about the variation in the species. And therefore, this enables these animals to exist and not become extinct, because when we have genetic variability, that is when we are able to say that a species is able to survive in the world. Mm-hmm. Yes, Caroline.
Thank you. Now, to that ordinary person who does not understand the biological concepts, how can you summarize biodiversity and maybe biodiversity loss in just simple terms?
Okay, I would just say biodiversity is the different types of plants and animals that exist in a certain ecosystem. Okay. And so when we talk of biodiversity loss, is when now we are able to witness a loss of animals, like animals are becoming extinct in their own ecosystems. And as a result of human activities, we have two main causes of biodiversity loss. Mm-hmm. And one is climate change.
Just to cut you, do we also include plants? Because you talked of animals, so...
Yes, yes. If we talk of an ecosystem, yes. In an ecosystem, for example, in the aquatic ecosystem, we are able to see the fish or the aquatic animals, and we also see the plants that exist in that ecosystem, like the planktons. So we are saying that this ecosystem, including the coral reefs, so you realize that for these fish to survive in the aquatic ecosystem, they depend on these planktons, which are plants, to survive, and also the coral reefs within that aquatic ecosystem. So yes, biodiversity includes plants and animals existing in a certain ecosystem.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So now maybe you can tell us about the possible causes of biodiversity loss.
Yes. So I would say that humanity is at the center of biodiversity loss, because you realize that with increase in population, people need habitats to exist in. People need food, and also they depend on the ecosystem services for them to survive. So with the increase in population, we've seen man being able to destroy the environment, and therefore as a result of the human activities, we are able to see climate change, which is really affecting our ecosystems. And secondly, we are able to see ecosystem transformations. We realize that there has been destruction of forests on a bigger scale, so resulting in things like desertification and drastic climatic conditions. We are seeing like the hurricanes and even the tsunamis. Those are a result of human activities, and therefore resulting in biodiversity loss. Yes.
So coming closer home, are there specific things or causes of biodiversity loss that are specific to our country now, Kenya, that you think maybe those are the main causes of biodiversity loss in Kenya? You've told us about climate change, deforestation and all that, but do we have like specific ones in Kenya?
Yes, coming closer home. This is very real. First of all, there is a pollution of our water sources. We see that industries now are releasing their raw waste directly into the rivers, resulting into the destruction of the wetlands. So we see that when waste are released into the rivers, we see that aquatic life is really disturbed. Fish are dying in these ecosystems.
Thank you so much, Carol. Now let's go to the implications now. What happens to me when we lose biodiversity? What happens to me? What happens to you? What happens to the environment? What are the implications?
Okay, so Carol, I'll take you back to the ecosystem diversity. And you realize that our ecosystem, they have probably three main functions. And one is the provision. So in our ecosystem, we are able to get food from animals, the animals that exist in these ecosystems. We are able to, you realize that the forests, they act as carbon sinks. And we also have that, you also realize that these ecosystems also provide oxygen. I've forgotten the term, but we are able to get the oxygen that we use. So for example, if we are destroying the forests, they no longer act as carbon sinks, and therefore there is a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. And even our way of life, the use of fossil fuels also leads to an increase in the production of carbon dioxide, and therefore carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, resulting in increased temperatures. And therefore the reason why we are witnessing climate change currently. What we are witnessing currently is that with the destruction of our ecosystems, first of all, we are witnessing varied climates. And therefore, you see in Kenya right now, we have prolonged droughts. We also have some seasons of increased rainfall leading to flooding. So those are some of the impacts of biodiversity loss that we are witnessing currently, Carol.
Okay, now looking at someone like me, I love to hike a lot, going to the forest, park. What can be the possible effect onto my kind of activity that I like to do when we lose biodiversity? Let me talk about losing animals, losing plants in that forest where I love to go to, or someone else who likes to hike goes to. What is the implication of biodiversity loss?
The implication is that for you now you will not be able to enjoy these services, because if you love going to for hiking in the forest to witness these wild animals, with biodiversity loss, we are saying that these animals no longer exist, or their numbers are drastically reduced. So for you will not be able to enjoy that activity completely, because if you go to the forest, you will not be able to see the numbers of animals that you are used to. So that is one result of impact of biodiversity loss. And even globally, it means Kenya will have, you know, Kenya is a tourist destination when it comes to wildlife. So if we are saying that we are not remedying this issue of biodiversity loss, then we are going to witness a reduced number of tourists coming to our country, Carol.
Okay, thank you so much. So what could be the possible solutions to reduce biodiversity loss?
The possible solutions, Carol, I would pack them into 4 categories. And first of all, we need to look at our energy consumption, and we need to move away from fossil fuels and embrace renewable energy. And so by doing that, we are reducing the level of emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And secondly, we look at our food production systems, because currently man has greatly impacted the environment or reduced the ecosystem for wild animals to exist. So by doing that, you realize that man has greatly cultivated land. Even in the forests, they have really reduced or done deforestation. So we need to relook at our food production and be able to embrace efficient food production methods, and even reduce our meat consumption. And by doing that, Caro, we are able to allow this, we will be able to allow wild animals to exist in their natural habitats, and therefore we are saying that we are reducing the disturbance that we are causing in the wildlife setup. Yes.
So,
sorry. I also think of, we also need to do something about the use of international waters, the fishing. So for me, I think it's important to set those zones where fishing is not supposed to happen, and also be able to regulate the use of international waters. By doing that, we are able to set aside areas where fish can really exist and multiply. And by doing that, we will be able to say that we are able to sustain our food sources. Yes.
okay. So do you think, or do you agree with my statement that it was okay for the government to ban charcoal burning because it contributes to biodiversity loss in one way or another?
Yes, Carol, I agree with you very much about that issue, because you realize that initially in the 70s, in the 50s, you realize that our population was still low, but now we are realizing that the population continues to grow, and therefore there is increased need for fuel sources. And therefore, we realize that people are clearing forests at a larger extent, and therefore now contributing to the loss of biodiversity. So I think government is in the right direction when they ban charcoal burning, but now they also need to come up with alternatives for people to be able to access or have these sources of energy. And by doing so, maybe clean energy should be made available even to the people in the villages, Caro.
Okay. So from my interaction with the people in the village or the common mwananchi, most of the people don't really know the importance of biodiversity by actually conserving animals and plants. So what do you think would be one of the things that is missing? Because I was thinking maybe empowerment. So I don't know, what is your thought about that?
It's true, Caro. Kenyans really don't know the importance of the environment, and they also don't realize that nature also has its own carrying capacity. And so for me, I think environmental education should be made mandatory, even for school-going kids. They should be able to understand from an early age that it's good to conserve the environment, and this education should be carried on even up to the university level. And also we need also to increase or intensify our awareness creation forums that we have, so that people are able to be educated on the importance of conservation. And I also, Caro, I would like to take you back to the Moi era. You realize that that day there was a national tree planting day. So you realize that people were able to set aside some of their hours and go out and plant trees, even though they didn't understand the implication of doing that. But I think also as a country we need to come up with such days where people from up there, the president, are able to lead the people in doing these conservation measures, Carol.
Wow. So do you think it's okay if I say we need to adopt a bottom-up approach when it comes to environmental conservation, that is biodiversity conservation? Like we said, we need to empower the people. So should we start from the grassroots, go and empower them before we set the laws? Because you can easily set the rules and say, you cannot go to this forest, we are conserving, we are protecting the biodiversity, you cannot hunt wildlife, but the people on the ground don't know, so should we say now, let's adopt that bottom-up approach?
Yes, Caro, I agree with you, but remember that policy is very critical in this case. So as we develop these policies, we need to do a gender mainstreaming kind of thing, where even the policy development should involve everyone. People should be active, and you realize that in our society is male-dominated society. So you realize that the most affected people are the women in the villages, because they don't even they are not involved even in policy formulation, even at the county levels. So we need to start by involving these people in formulating our policies and laws. And after we've done that, it doesn't stop there. Now we need to go back now and involve them even in implementing these policies. And by doing that, people will be able to own up and be active in this conservation effort.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for your time. That's it for us today. I hope to see you again next time. I think we'll discuss many more issues regarding environmental conservation, and thank you for your efforts in promoting environmental conservation, biodiversity conservation.
Thank you so much, Caro. I'm humbled for this time, for having me here, and hope that we shall discuss more in future. Thank you.
So thank you so much for everyone who is going to be watching this. That was our interview for the day. Expect to see many more interviews from Caroline and I and many more people. And if you have any comment, you have any question, suggestion, please leave a comment on below. We will look at your comments. If you have a question for Caroline, direct it to her. We might have her to come back again and explain, or we can bring someone else. So thank you so much for your time. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.